Hello everyone. I would like to thank you first of all to Gujarat University and Modi sir for giving me an opportunity to deliver a talk on the fantastic fungi and their role in nature in this FDB program. So, as we know that the earth came in existence nearly 4.5 billion years ago. We know that the Big Bang theory and all that things, and after that, the Earth came in existence. But the first life form came later on, around 3.8 billion years ago. At that time, the Earth atmosphere was very primitive. There was no oxygen, and there was no some other basic requirement which needed for the life. So the most primitive organism came in existence, that is the prokaryotic organisms, around 3.8 billion years ago. After that, the first eukaryotic cells came in existence around 2.7 billion years ago. So we can say after the 500 million years of a prokaryotic organism, the first eukaryotic cell which have a nucleus came in existence. But we have a concern right now with the fungi. The first fungal cell came in existence around a 1 or 1.5 billion years ago, and then there is a changes can be continuously happen in the earth environment, and by this way the evolution can be continuous. As I told that the first cell or first life form came in existence around 3 billion years ago, and that was the most primitive organism right now we known as a bacteria. That bacteria is a prokaryotic cell, and they have most primitive parts. They have they have a most primitive requirement like the genetic material, DNA or RNA. They have a cell wall. They have some locomotory organs like a flagella. They have a pili. Like such kind of compounds or such kind of a parts can be there in prokaryotic cells, which make them different from the eukaryotic cell. The eukaryotic cell itself, which is a very well developed cell, which came in existence later on after the prokaryotic cells. This eukaryotic cell have a well developed nucleus. They have other organelles like endoplasmic reticulum. They have lysosome, centrioles, peroxisomes, cytoskeletons like microtubules, some filaments, microfilaments, uh, as well as the house of energy, that is the mitochondria. These all the things came as the requirement can be changes, as well as with the changes in the environment, these organelles they evolve. But the thing is how to classify these organisms. So the scientists have tried to classify the living organism in various ways for the centuries. This classification ultimately, the one of the legendary person, the Aristotle, classified the living organism on the simple basis, on the basis whether they are live on land, water, or air. So he classified on very primitive way. But the biologists want a broader system for the classification of a living organism. So in the golden era of a biological science, that is the 19th and the 20th century, and particularly the mid 20th century, the biologists recognized a two vastly different cell types, that is prokaryote and the eukaryote, and based a division of a living and the extinct world on these two broad categories. So they categorize in the broadly two ways, eukaryotic and the prokaryotic. But the division based primarily on the absence or presence respectively of the membrane bound nucleus containing the genetic material. If the nuclear membrane bound organelle is there, the kind of a cell we consider as a eukaryotic cell. While there is no membrane bound nuclear material is there in a cell, such kind of cell we consider as a prokaryotic cells. So these two kingdom classification of organism is not suitable. So why? Because in the golden era of biological science, there were discoveries happened of some minute organism, some microorganisms like a bacteria. So where to put these organisms? So the question arises. So scientists began a grouping living organism under the different categories. And for that, the Ernst Haeckel, Robert Whittaker, and the Carl Woese and some other biologists attempted a broader system of a classification, like a three kingdom classification. And among these, all these different classification, the five kingdom classification, which was proposed by the Robert Whittaker, stood out and the widely used. Whittaker proposed that the organisms should be broadly divided into the kingdoms based on the certain characteristics. So he suggested the classification must be carried out on the basis of some common characteristics. Those who have some kind of a common characteristics put this kind of an organism into the one kingdom. So he suggests that the common characteristics like a structure of the cell, mode of nutrition, the source of a nutrition, the relationship between the organisms, the body organization, as well as the reproduction. These kind of the characters can make one organism from different from the another. And so he gave the five kingdom classifications, and he proposed five kingdom classification that includes the monera, protists, plant, animals, and the fungi. Among these, we have a concern with the fungi, and the fungi have a something different kind of an characteristics. So the all the generally the microorganisms which we cannot see by a naked eye, they put under the monera as well as the protists, while the fungi we can say it included in the have a both kind of a characteristics, like they act as a microorganisms also, and they look like a plants also, like for example the mushroom. Okay, so this fungi is not a prokaryotic cell, it is a eukaryotic cells. They absorb nutrients, but they do not have roots, but they have a rhizoids. So such kind of a characteristics make a fungi totally different from the other living systems. But we can say the fungi are look like a plants, but it is a more closely related to the animal than the plant. So when we see the its genetic traits, it is more common or more closely related to the animals. So now let's see what are the fungi. Fungi are heterotrophic organisms. These fungi are multicellular and eukaryotic. Their mode of nutrition is a saprophytic, as they use the decaying organic matter as a food. So we can say the fungi are saprophytes. They utilize dead organic materials as a food. They have a cell wall which is made up of chitin, while the bacterial cell wall made up of peptidoglycan, while fungal cell wall made up of chitin. Fungi also have a symbiotic association with some blue green algae. So such kind of characteristics make a different from the bacteria. So we can say the fungi are not bacteria. They are not a plant because they do not have a photosynthesis process. They cannot carry out the photosynthesis process because they do not have a chlorophylls. So the example, the yeast, mushroom, and like aspergillus, these are the example of a fungi. So now let's see the characteristics of fungi. Fungi are not a plant. This is the first and the foremost things. They are non-photosynthetic organisms. They are eukaryotes because it have a well-developed nucleus. The fungi do not possess a locomotory organ, so it will not move from the one place to another place. So it is a totally non-motile. Mostly the fungi are saprobes, so they can live on a dead organic material, including the responsible for the decaying the higher organisms. They are absorptive heterotrophs. They digest the food first and then absorb it into their body. So the mode of nutrition is absorption. They release some digestive enzymes to break down organic material or their host itself. So wherever this organism, the fungi can grow, they release the enzymes. These enzymes is very useful for the digestion of some basic food material which is needed for their growth. They store the food energy as a glycogen. These organisms are very important decomposers, and it have a very vital role in recyclation of nutrition or nutrients in the environment. They play a very vital role in the carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, as well as they responsible for the decompositions. So they have a very vital role over here. Every year, it is assumed that the 10 raised to 11 million ton of organic material can be fallen down on this earth, particularly of a plant material. These all material can be decayed or decomposed by the fungi. So it have a very vital role as a decomposer as well as the recyclation of nutrients in the environment. Generally, all the fungi are multicellular except one, that is the yeast. Because the yeast are unicellular, yeast are look like a bacteria. They are eukaryotic, but it look like a bacteria. So we can say the yeast and the bacteria almost look like a similar. These fungi lack a true roots, stems, or leaves. As you are seeing on your screen that the mushroom is a best example. It look like a plant, but they do not have a roots. They do not have a stems, or they do not have a leaves. Okay, so we can say it is not a plant. The cell wall of the fungi are made up of a chitin, which is a very complex polysaccharide material, and we can say it is a one of the difficult material to degrade. This chitin is exactly the same kind of material present in a insect's exoskeleton, so it is difficult to degrade also. The body of a fungi is known as a thallus and grow as a microscopic tube, or filaments are called as a hyphae. Now the fungi have a generally the two different kind of a structure. One is a filamentous kind of a structure, that is we generally known, and what we have an impression that is a true fungi we call. And the second one, that is the yeast, that is a single cell, and it is a filamentous fungus generally are multicellular, while the yeast are totally unicellular and look like a bacteria. Some fungi are internal or external parasite. So these fungi can act over here as a parasite. So they can grow inside the living host and responsible for the causing a disease conditions. So it is very important over here. So the one organism can grow on other organisms. So that's why it is we call as a parasite. A few fungi act as a predators and capture a prey like a roundworm. So the predaceous fungi, which is feeding on a nematodes, that is a roundworm, and the fungi can grow on this organism itself. So these organisms can live on the predators. Some fungi is used for the food purpose and they are edible, while other are poisonous. Generally, these fungi need a humid atmosphere for their growth. They need a temperate region for their temperate condition for their growth. And we found in jungle area where this fungi, ultimately the mushroom kind of a fungi can be easily we can find out. Right now we have a good atmosphere which is very favorable for the growth of a fungus as well as the mushrooms. So this mushroom, or we can say the fungi, can also be useful as a edible purpose as a food material, because it have a very high content of a protein, while the other mushrooms are poisonous. So generally we it is assumed that the whatever the coloration are there of a mushrooms, these color mushroom are generally considered as a poison as mushroom. So we are not trying to use it as a food material. They produce both sexual and the asexual spores, and classified by their sexual reproductive structures. Now, the what are the spores? Spore are one kind of we can say the metabolic dormant form of these organisms. Whenever these organisms can get a favorable chance for growth, they can grow. Then they ultimately remain as it is for a longer times and try to survive in adverse condition. Whenever they get a favorable condition, they can easily grow and convert into the fruiting body. Uh, so the spore have various kind of shapes you are seeing on your screen, that they form. They are ultimately the round shape, oval shape, spiral shape, etc. Shapes are there. They can grow best in warm and moist environment. That's why I just told that right now the monsoon season is going on, and this monsoon season is very favorable for the growth of fungi. So the ultimately these all the studies comprises the one structural aspects, its internal aspects, like the nucleic acids, the it is made up of what, it look like what, etc. So the whole study of the fungi is known as a mycology. So the mycology is a subject in which we are going to study the fungi, and the person who is studying the fungi called as a mycologist. These organisms not only play a very important role in the nature, particularly with respect to the beneficial aspect, they also have some detrimental aspects also. For example, they are responsible to cause the disease, so it is a pathogenic. The pathogenic not only for the human being or animals, they are also pathogenic for the plants also. They responsible for the causing some disease in plants or crops. So in that case, right now we are using some chemicals that is known as a fungicide to kill a fungus to save the various kind of crops also. The fungi includes the puffballs, yeast, mushrooms, toadstools, rusts, smuts, ringworms, and the mold. Generally, we have come in contact with the two organism, that is the mold and yeast, only two. The other we whenever we have to need a special study in that only we came into contact. As we know that the mankind history and the medical microbiology history can be changed by the single discovery, that is the discovery of antibiotic penicillin, which was discovered by the Alexander Fleming in 1928, and for that obviously he awarded a Nobel Prize. So this penicillin antibiotic is made up by the penicillium mold. The penicillium mold produce some antimicrobial agents which responsible to kill some pathogenic bacteria like a staphylococcus, and generally the gram positive bacteria can be killed easily by these penicillins. The fungus have a various sizes. If we are talking about the yeast, I told you that it is look like a bacteria, so the size of this yeast is around micrometer in size, while the puffball fungus have a size approximately 20 to 60 centimeters, so we can say it is in foot. Okay, so the fungi have a range in a size from the unicellular to the large puffballs. Now let's see its vegetative structure. The fungi have a hyphae, which is a tubular shape, one continuous cells, which is filled with the cytoplasm and the nuclei. So these hyphae have this tubular shape, and it contain only the cytoplasm and the nuclei. In this cytoplasm, the whatever they require, they already have. That is it's we can say it's genetic material, some enzymes, some amino acids, some whatever the basic requirement it needed, it is present in this tubular like of structure. The fungi hyphae is multinucleated also. It can be separated by the septum. The hard cell wall of a chitin look like a insect exoskeleton. So the cell wall of this hyphae is made up of chitin, which is very important. The fungi have a stolon and the rhizoids. The stolon are horizontal hyphae that connect the groups of a hyphae to each other. So the stolon is a part which is responsible for the connection of a hyphae, while the rhizoids look like a root, or we can consider the roots of a plant over also. It look like a plant roots that responsible for the anchoring of the fungus at the substratum. So for attachment, for the growth, these rhizoids play an important role, as well as play an important role for the uptake of nutrients. The cross wall in this hyphae called as a septa, which may a form of a compartment, and because of this septa, this hyphae convert into the multinucleated into the various cells. So we can separate these cells also if we need for the single cell study. The septa have a pores for movement of a cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm material can move from the one to another cell through the pores, and it form a network called as a mycelia, and that run through the thallus. So the mycelia uh, present generally beneath the substratum. The fungi get a carbon from the organic source, and the tip of hyphae responsible for the release of enzymes. That's why enzymes play an important role for a breakdown of a substrate, and this substrate then utilized or adsorbed by the fungal hyphae. So this product ultimately diffuse back into the hyphae itself. So the I told you that the carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle can be very important over here with these organic sources, and these organic sources can be utilized by these fungi by the release of enzymes. These enzymes released from the tips of a fungi, and these enzymes responsible for the breakdown of these substrates. These substrates utilized again back by the fungal hyphae itself. So the digested material then used by this hyphae. They also modify this hyphae according to their requirement or their habitat. So fungi may be classified based on their cell divisions, either they with or without the cytokinesis process. So they divided into two, the aseptate and the septate. The aseptate or coinocytic fungi, they do not have a septa. So there were no cross wall formation in fungal cell. In septa or septate, the septa is there, so the cross wall formation is there. as you are seeing on your screen. So the septate hyphae or coinocytic hyphae, the coinocytic hyphae do not have a septa. So it remain throughout the cell as it is. It is a longer cell over here. While in septate hyphae, each septa can separate one cell to the another cell, and each cell have their own nuclei. They have pores between the movement for the cytoplasmic material. So the fungal hyphae we are seeing over here on the screen, that the some parasitic hyphae on the plant as well as the animals. The hyphae can grow from their tips. The hypha always grow from the tip, not from the base. The mycelium is an extensive feeding web of a hyphae, and the mycelia are ecologically very active bodies of a fungi. So the wall of a fungi or hyphae is a little bit rigid, while the tip of this hyphae is very active, very plastic and stretchable. So the mycelia or hyphae can grow always from the tip. This mycelia play a very important role for the formation of a ecological environment beneath the plants, and the beneath the plant they can come into contact with the plant roots and play an important role for the nutrition exchange between the plants as well as the fungi. Now let's see about the reproductive structures. So they have a sexual and the asexual mode of a reproduction. They can reproduce by the one of the two way, asexually or sexually. The asexual reproduction is the most common in the fungi and produce a genetically identical organisms itself. So it is a very important, and generally all the fungi, nearby all the fungi can grow by asexual way. Some fungi reproduce by sexually when the conditions are poor for their survival, as well as there is a scarcity of nutrients. In that case only the fungi can reproduce sexually. Now before going to that, the what are the spores? Spore are one kind of adaptation to the life on a land. So how to survive in adverse condition? So the mother nature give a one solution to the organism, such kind of organisms, that they convert into the spore. So they ultimately remain in environment for a longer time, but they are dormant. They ensure that the species will disperse to a new location. So when the spores generate, they disperse into the new locations. If there is an adverse condition is there with the abiotic or biotic factors which is responsible for the locomotion of these spores. Each spore generally contain a reproductive cells that form a new organism. They have capacity to form a new organisms. Whenever they found a favorable condition, favorable nutrition, favorable environment, they can easily grow. These spores are non-motile and they disperse by the both the way biotic and abiotic. The best example is a wind. So when they get a favorable condition, they can grow and germinating into the form germination in the convert into the mycelium and form a mycelial network. So mycelia have a huge surface area, as we are seeing on the screen. The more surface area aids digestion and the absorption of a food, and that's why they form a mycelial network for the uptake, easy uptake of a nutrition. So this is a generalized life cycle of a fungus. They produce both the way, sexual as well as the asexual. They form by the asexual way, they have haploid form, and in asexual reproduction, they only have a haploid form, while in sexual reproduction, they have a dikaryotic and the diploid form for the reproduction. So how they reproduce sexually? So used when the environmental conditions are poor, lack of nutrition, lack of space, not getting the proper environment like moisture contains. In that case, the fungus cells try to reproduce themselves by sexual way. But there is no male, no female fungi. But some fungi have a dimorphism. That means they may grow as a mycelia or yeast like a stage. So in the at a 25-degree temperature, they have a filamentous kind of a structure, while at a 37 degree centigrade, they have a yeast like a structure. And such kind of a fungus are responsible to cause a disease also. So in tissue, they form a filamentous kind of a structure. While outside when we try to grow on artificial laboratory media, they form a colony like a structure, bacterial like a bacterial structure. So in the yeast form. In sexual reproduction, the haploid hyphae from the two mating types, that is we consider the plus or minus, they fuse together, and by this way they do the fertilizations from the hyphae with these two nuclei that become a zygote, and this zygote divides to make a spore. So here the plus and the minus cells fuse together and form a zygote. This zygote then the divides into the various division by the and the form a spores, and these four again move from the one place to another form, another place, and whenever they get the favorable condition, again convert into the normal vegetative form. While in asexual reproduction, there are the three different types are there. Generally, these three types are there. Other types are also there. So, but asexual reproduction in fungus happen by the fragmentation or by the budding or by the asexual spore. In the fragmentation, that is a part of a mycelium which become a separated and begins a life of its own. So it can be fragment from the vegetative form, and this broken part start life, their own life separately. In budding, which is a small cell form and get pinched off as it grows to the full size. So on the cell, one more small cell forms can arise. It pinched out on the surface of a cells. So the best known example is a yeast. While in asexual form, the production of spore by a single mycelium. So the spore may be formed directly on the hyphae, that is best example is a penicillin. Inside the sporangia, Pilobolus sporangia. On the fruiting body, the example, the mushroom is the best example. button mushroom, for example, agaricus or amanthina fruiting bodies. So they form by this way also. The fruiting bodies are modified hyphae that make a asexual spore. An upright stalk called the sporangiophore and support the spore case or a sporangium. So the spore is already there, but it is on a sporangiophore which harbor a sporangium. This sporangium harbor a spores, and this sporangium, when broke down, the spore will be released and it move again in the environment. Now let's see about some major group of fungi. The generally it can be classified based on its nutritions. Fungi are saprobes, so they act as a decomposers. For example, the some molds, mushrooms, etc. They always grow on the decaying material. Some fungi are parasites. That means they act as a responsible for the causing the disease and harm the host. The example, the rust and the smuts, which attack the plants. Some are beneficial and they play an important role with some other host. For example, the lichens and the mycorrhizas. They have mutualism between the host and the fungi itself. There are the five phyla of a fungi generally. The Catridiomycota, the example is a Catrids. Zygomycota, the whatever the we know the common mold is there, that is all are the Zygomycota. Ascomycota, which contain the sac, and that's why it is called as a sac fungi. The Basidiomycota, that is a club-like fungi, and the Deuteromycota, that is considered as a imperfect fungi. The Catridiomycota phylum generally found in a marine environment. So these are the marine kind of fungi we can say. They mostly the saprophyte, that means that they lives on a dead or a decaying organic material. Their spore have a flagella. They have a flagellated spores. The phylum Zygomycota, mostly the terrestrial, and they have a two type of a hyphae, the stolons as well as the rhizoids. The stolons are generally horizontal, which we earlier already described. They can spread across the surface. For example, you are seeing on your screen the strawberry and some fruits we have at our home, which is decaying because of the fungal growth. It look like this. And the rhizoids, they are the vertical, digs into the surface. So they are digging, they penetrate inside the surface and they can grow. For example, the pathogenic fungi, which responsible to cause the disease. The phylum Ascomycota is considered as a sac-like fungi. Generally, they are multicellular except yeast. The yeast are only fungi which is a unicellular. The most undergo the asexual reproduction, and this is the one of the largest phylum of a fungi. You are seeing on your screen, these all are the various form of a phylum. Some morels are also there. The morels are what? They are look like a corals, but they are mold. That's why it is called as a morels. The phylum Basidiomycota is a club kind of a fungi. The club fungi have a fruiting bodies which are club shape, as seen on your screen, that generally these kind of a fungi found on wood, or also sometimes we found at our doors if continuously they are wet. So the wood containing or harbor, we can say, the such kind of fruiting bodies, the club shape of fungi. They generally edible. They the reproductive structure of this phylum called as a basidia, and that's why we call as a basidiomycota. It includes the mushroom, puffball, and some self fungi. See, the puffball kind of a fungi release the spore when it the broke down. The fifth phylum is a Deuteromycota. They generally reproduce by asexual means. These fungi also called as a imperfect fungi. They do not fit into the commonly established taxonomic classification, and that's why it is considered as a imperfect fungi. They do not have a sexual structure. The multicellular tissue is similar to the hyphae of a sac fungi and the club fungi, and the hyphae with the asexual spores is similar to the sac fungi and the club fungi. The best common example is cheese rotting fungi and the pathogenic fungi which is responsible to cause a ringworm. Obviously, we are studying this all the things because we have a human, as a human, have a interaction with the fungus. Obviously, they have a both the kind of a roles, beneficial as well as the harmful. So the beneficial effect of this fungi, if we consider they are the best decomposers, they are responsible for the carbon recycling, they are responsible for the biosynthesis of a various kind of important economical important products like drugs, some antibiotics, some alcohol, some organic acids, as well as used as the food like a mushroom. They also useful to prepare a fermented products. These fungi can act as a model organism for the biochemical as well as the genetic studies, because very microscopic of organism, so we can easily handle it. And it is a eukaryotic organism, so we are using and it is a, near by the animal also. They are responsible for the production of some vitamin like compound. They also responsible for the formation of some hormones, and they also responsible to form some insecticides compound also. So we have some benefits from the fungi, and that's why we are focusing on the fungi. Fungi form a beneficial partnership, and they have a symbiotic relation with some other organisms such as trees and some flowering plants. The example, the lichen, which have a symbiotic relation with the algae, and so the algae and the fungi both get the benefit from the each other, and this relation is a very beneficial for their survivals also. Obviously, it also have some harmful effect. For example, they are responsible for the destruction of food, spoilage of a food, lumber, responsible for the destruction of some paper, as well as the responsible to decaying the cloth. So we are not getting the benefit over here. It have a detrimental role also in nature because they can grow on decaying material, organic material, so they can easily grow over here. They're responsible to cause the plant disease, they're responsible to cause the animal diseases, also responsible to cause the human diseases, including the spore of fungi responsible to cause a allergic reaction. They produce a toxin by the, for example, poisonous mushroom, as well as within a food, for example, aflatoxin. So they have harmful role also. See, they responsible recently after the COVID surge, we found that the few patients got the infection with the mucormycosis. Okay, so the such kind of detrimental role is also there. So all these things play an important role over here for the survival of organisms, and they have very important relation with the human being as well as the nature. So ultimately we can say the fungi have a network like internet which already formed in the ages. This funky network was a prehistoric blast. It was created here before the humans were dumb and trying to live life. The mycelium was a part of this as well as our modern day plants. The fungi were the cells which had a really big heart because they are believing in the sharing as well as the caring. That's how the fungi roll, and their epic network used for the good of others also. So this is the all the things, basic things about the fungi. I again would like to thank you, Gujarat University, as well as the Modi sir, for giving me an opportunity to speak on this platform. Thank you very much.